The Humanist Library, and Madly Teach, A Layman Looks at Public School Education by Mortimer Smith. Copyright 1949, Chicago, Illinois. Bibliographical note. It occurs to me that other laymen and parents, not acquainted with educational literature, may find pleasure equal to mine in some of the books I have enjoyed and sometimes leaned upon heavily in the writing of this essay. Some of them are mentioned in the text. Two in particular I would recommend, without reservations. Jacques Maritain's brilliant Terry lectures at Yale, published under the title Education at the Crossroads, Yale University Press, 1943, and two little books by Sir Richard Livingstone, president of Corpus Christi College, Oxford, combined in one volume under the title On Education, originally issued in the United States by the Macmillan Company and now by Cambridge University Press. As stated in my text, many of the books by the late Albert J. Nock deal entertainingly and sometimes trenchantly with educational subjects. Teacher in America, by Jacques Barzun, Atlantic Little Brown, 1945, considers ponderous matters amusingly and with a nice combination of charm and common sense. Nor should the reader overlook the various writings of Robert M. Hutchins and Mark Van Doren, who have worked valiantly to preserve genuine educational values in the face of the modern onslaught. The literature of the modern progressive school is vast and is still best represented by the writings of John Dewey. Perhaps his Democracy and Education, the Macmillan Company, 1921, is the most complete one-volume statement of the modern viewpoint. Any reader who wants further documentation of how public school men regard education, I would refer to the flood of reports and research projects turned out by the National Education Association and its subsidiary organizations, and to similar reports from the United States Office of Education, to the numerous published surveys of school systems, to the propaganda of state departments of education, and to almost any book, article, or utterance by any professor of education. I think the reader, dogged enough to survive the prose style of these outpourings, will agree that I do not exaggerate in insisting that there is an extraordinary uniformity of opinion among public school men regarding the aims and content of education. Mortimer Smith, 1949. Forward. American education is so defective in theory and practice as seriously to threaten the long continuance of the way of life to further which this nation was founded. We have become, largely because of what schooling has done to us, a people incompetent to function as free men, which is something else again than flattered and manipulated robots. What is the use of abundance if we are trained to use it with the intelligence of children who never grow up? Quite a few observers of the American scene have lately been speaking their minds concerning this. Even I have said my 2 pennies worth about it. We fault-finders vary in the way we put things, but we agree in being mighty dissatisfied, alarmed. Now comes Mr. Mortimer Smith with a new and fresh treatment of the subject. To join this company of the disturbed and vocal, a goodly group, albeit not well thought of by the pedagogical elite. The academic hierarchy will not sing Mr. Smith's praises, nor will it bother to denounce him. Its members will serenely ignore him. They are too absorbed in teaching the teachers how to deal not with human beings, but with creatures such as by nature ought not to exist. Never could exist, were it not for black magic, devoted to a more than dubious educational philosophy, pleased as punch with themselves, and unable to see how anyone in his right mind can jest at what they say. But Mr. Smith's thoughtful complaints will be welcomed by many who are intelligent laymen in respect to education, people like himself, by many precipient parents aghast at what the schools have done or are doing to their boys and girls, by many who, intent on promoting sound government and decent craftsmanship of thought and action, must take the products of our schools and colleges and try to make something of them and buy them in terms of adultness. There will be not a few such persons who will be as grateful to Mr. Smith as I am for his penetration, his honesty, his simplicity, also for his charitable good humor, a thing hard to maintain when one is indignant. Mr. Smith ends this admirable essay with a question. We have been going on, he says, for some time on the theory that education consists simply of experience and change and, quote-unquote, growth. Perhaps we need to set up some ends for education. Perhaps we need to ask, growth for what? He knows, of course, that there is no perhaps about it. Our professors of education, our administrators, our school boards, teachers whom they train and employ, avoid inquiry about purpose as they would avoid the plague. Purpose in life, in labor, in thought, in love, in citizenship, in anything, even in education itself. Why? Why? Because to ask about the why of things is both personally disturbing and disruptive of whatever static social patterns happen to be. To ask why might result in teachers remaining human beings and children becoming human beings, both given to making embarrassing inquiries instead of being content to be placid tools for production and consumption of goods. Complacent believers in whatever those who happen to wield social control tell them is the truth. Men who ask why are necessary, to be sure, for the survival of freedom and democracy, but who nowadays wishes a free state at the price of possible discomfort? Who, for democracy, is willing to run the risk of questioning closely those flattering demagogues who pleasingly blarney the electorate and who give much in bread and circuses? Certainly not the rank and file of hard-headed Americans. The tragic thing about American education is that by avoiding ultimate questions and concentrating on how to get loaves and fishes, the schools and colleges make out of our youngsters precisely what their parents wish them to become. Mr. Smith bids us recognize that the fault lies not in our pedagogues, but in ourselves. Educators are bone of our bone, flesh of our flesh. What he advocates, therefore, is more dangerous by far than communism. The communist is not, as a matter of fact, much of a revolutionist. The communist would only substitute the logical secularism of Karl Marx for the pragmatic secularism of John Dewey. But this man, Smith, is really and truly a revolutionist, comrade to Socrates, to Isaiah and Jeremy, to the Buddha, to the Christian saints. He and the rest of us who toss about this sort of dynamite ought to be locked up. The way things are moving, it looks not unlikely that before too long we shall be. Bernard Iddings Bell, 1949.